Okay, welcome everyone. My name is David Kilnick, and I am President and CEO of the LGBT Network. And we are so excited today to bring you another town hall. This is going to be a series of town halls on Vote Proud to make sure that we get the LGBTQ and allied vote out in this very important election day. We'll be hosting these series of workshops until Election Day. But let me tell you a little bit about Vote Proud New York. You can see my co-host, well, you saw my co-host on the screen. He'll be back in a second. But Vote Proud is a mobilization and organizing campaign to get every LGBTQ and allied New Yorker to participate in the 2020 election. We know this is an election that is really, really important. We're going to have special guests discussing important issues that face our community while we build a powerful LGBTQ and allied voting bloc to elect those that stand on the side of equality and justice. And you'll be seeing this come up on screen every now and then, but to text Vote Proud to 484848. And when you do that, you'll get information back that will give you links to register to vote if you're not voted, about where your polling place is, about where your early voting place is, and how we can get more involved in this important election. So the series of Vote Proud town halls I'm going to be hosting alongside a good friend and an incredible person who I'm going to tell you a little bit about now, Louis Bradbury. Louis Bradbury is a longtime leading LGBTQ and HIV advocate, HIV/AIDS advocate, who also has been an incredible leader in our communities in his own right. So let me just share a little bit about my friend, Louis Bradbury. Louis has been the president of the Calamus Foundation for the past decade that has granted more than $25 million to support a diverse group of LGBT organizations. And this is so important because it builds leadership, it builds support, it builds community, and it saves lives. And there is not another foundation that I know of that really supports the LGBTQ community like the Calamus Foundation. He has served as co-chair of New York State's Empire State Pride Agenda Board from 2011 to 2014, which was a historic time for our community when we saw the passage of the Marriage Equality Act and the Dignity for All Students Act. And as board chair, he helped to shepherd those two major policy initiatives through to bring equality for marriage for same-sex couples, and also protection for our students in the schools from bullying and harassment. Louis also served as president of the board of the Gay Men's Health Crisis, creating state-of-the-art HIV testing in the mid to late 1990s when our community needed the most. And while Louis has served on more boards to name, it should be noted that he has also shared his expertise and leadership skills with the National Suicide Prevention Foundation, Planned Parenthood of New York City, and the Education Alliance. And now, if that's not enough, Louis began his career as an attorney for the United States Department of Justice, and boy, can we leave him there now, after graduating from Harvard Law School and becoming president and CEO of Revere Cooper and Brass, a Fortune 500 company. Now, I think we can all say a collective wow, and how lucky we are to have Louis as a leader and co-host. And I am beyond excited about doing this work together with Louis through Election Day and beyond. And thank you Louis, thank you once again for your incredible leadership in our community. So everyone, please welcome our co-host from now until Election Day, Louis Bradbury. So welcome, Louis.
Thank you, David. Your flattery doesn't go unnoticed, I guess, but thank you. You had asked me to kind of say why I care about this and be involved. And over the last few weeks, it seems to me there are two words that characterize how I feel in this current environment. That's uncertainty and chaos. Uncertain about where the disease is going to go, who it's going to affect, how it's going to affect us, the economy, people who are losing their jobs, have lost their jobs, people who have businesses that are in trouble, and social unrest we have because our racial inequality is coming to a head. And then finally, the chaos that there is no national leadership dealing with any of these issues in a way that we can rely on. A few days ago, the CDC said you should get tested if you've been exposed this morning. Yesterday, apparently under political pressure, they said, don't get tested if you've been exposed unless you show symptoms. No one knows what to do, or at least I don't, and I'm certain. And I was thinking, is the only thing we can do is vote? And so I called David a few weeks ago and said, David, help me. what can we do? And he said, well, voting is obviously important. And so we start this to help everyone who's on here, the LGBTQ community and our allies, to what are the issues? How do we vote? And I don't mean how do we vote like for which person, but there's so much confusion on whether we do a mail-in ballot. We're allowed to do a mail-in ballot. It'll get counted. We show up in person and those risks. And so David said we ought to have a series of events and bring on speakers who can help us sort out what we want to do and how we vote.
Mm-hmm.
So here we are.
Yeah, so here we are in this time of chaos, like you said, Louis, and uncertainty, and with the White House purposely creating confusion amongst people and distrust in our institutions, right? So hopefully, what we're going to do from now and through November 3rd is to break down break down all of that. Restore trust in the institutions that we have and participate in those institutions, which includes our right to vote. And we're also going to be, as Louis and I talked about prior, there's other ways to get involved too, to be a poll watcher. And so over the course of the next 12 weeks or so, we're going to have folks on who are going to talk to us about becoming a poll watcher, about other things that we can do. And we're going to bring the New York State Democratic chairman on in a second, Jay Jacobs. But we we obviously know we have the larger presidential race. Then we have just as important local races that we need to in on. And Louis, I don't know if you want to say a few words about that.
Well, I want to welcome Jay Jacobs, and we'll give you a little background about him. He is the New York State Democratic Party chairman. He is also the county chairman of the Nassau County Democratic Organization. I'm sorry?
Yeah, no, good. Yeah.
Oh, okay. He has also, during his leadership for the last 20 years, brought in diversity and accomplished many things that have not been done in Nassau County. He saw the election of the first woman county executive, the first Democratic supervisor on the town council of Hempstead in 112 years. And then he helped flip the Nassau County delegation to the New York State Senate from red to blue, so that the New York State Senate is now in firm control of the Democratic Party, and we can accomplish many things we've tried to do for the last 20 years or 30 years.
Cool. And I'm going to continue that introduction because we are so fortunate to have Jay with us here today, and to our production team behind the scenes. Let's bring Jay onto our screen. And so we should be seeing Jay join us in 1 second. Welcome, Jay. So now as our New York State Democratic Chair, Jay, you're poised to be team captain in delivering a big New York State blue wave in 2020. And if I can say, and this is not as the president CEO of LGBT Network, this is in my role as 2020 Biden delegate, and that, from the convention last week, your leadership of the New York State 2020 Democratic delegation at this very unprecedented time was absolutely incredible and stellar. You kept us all connected as delegates and focused in on the work at hand. Jay is also a Democratic National Committee member, and while I know Democratic politics takes up much of Jay's time, he is also a successful businessman as president and CEO of TLC Camps, and plays an active role as a charitable philanthropist, making sure the sons and daughters of 9/11 victims, underprivileged children, all have an opportunity to have a camp experience. So thank you and welcome, Jay, and thank you for taking the time to be our inaugural guest on this.
My pleasure, and thanks for having me. And I'm honored that I'm the inaugural guest. We have such an important year ahead of us, and it's a very consequential year. But look, we've had 3.5 years of consequential times, extraordinary times. We've seen things we never imagined before. And, some of the things that we cared most deeply about had been threatened like never before. So, everybody likes to say, and I've said this on numerous occasions, that this is the most important election in our lifetime. But I'd like to say this is the second most important election in our lifetime. We lost the first most important election in our lifetime, and that was in 2016. because had we not done that, we wouldn't be in this mess right now. So we have to fight and be stronger and more vigilant than ever before to make sure we don't lose again. In fact, we need to elect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, because so much of what we depend upon in this country, so many of the freedoms that we have come to depend upon and for some people take for granted, are all up for grabs, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Jay, last week was the Democratic National Convention, and this week is the 3-ring, 5-ring circus of the Republican National Convention. I was wondering if you could maybe give some of the highlights of the Democratic Convention and the circus, as well as maybe talk about the Democratic platform and the platform the Republican National Convention adopted today, which is exactly the same platform they adopted in 2016, including their platform to be against marriage equality and other LGBT issues.
Look, individual liberty and freedom has never been something that Republicans in the current time have taken, with seriousness or as something that they should defend. So it does not surprise me, whatever they do. Frankly, up until today, they weren't even talking about a platform at all. They did no work on a platform. Their platform was simply re-elect Donald Trump. Now, the Democratic Convention, which took place last week, I think brought to the forefront in a very difficult process or format, I should say, brought to the forefront the issues that we as Democrats hold so dear and feel are so important. And whether it was healthcare, LGBTQ rights, whatever it is that we have been fighting for, you saw that featured last week. This week, I've been watching, and I've been watching each of the days, and I'll be watching tonight. And I think it's so important. What it strikes me as unfortunate is that we've come to a time where the Trump Republican Party doesn't believe that it has any obligation to speak the truth. They just simply make things up. Now, you can take facts and you can take how someone voted on something and you can put your spin on it, but you at least have to have, from a start, some basis in fact to go on. They don't. It's amazing to me. Frankly, the things they've been saying about Joe Biden, and I heard this Pam Bondi, whatever her name was, the former Attorney General of the state of Florida, I think she was, something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Give this terrible indictment of Joe Biden, using the same Russian propaganda on the Ukraine issue that has been debunked. Our intelligence services have said it's not true. Our intelligence services have told that to the President of the United States. They've told that to the Congress that it's not true, and yet they continue to go forward with it. And then she stood up there and she said that other close members, I don't know if you heard this, other close members of the Biden family have also been enriched greatly. And she talked about 2 other close members of the Biden family, never naming them. It reminded me of Joe McCarthy holding up that piece of paper, at that Senate hearing and saying that he had in his hand a list of 20 or 30 or whatever the number was, registered communists who work at the State Department. And when anybody asked to see the list, well, he just didn't find it convenient to share it. Well, this is the kind of nonsense in politics that we're now seeing. And I think we have to do something about it. And I don't think we can play by the Marquis de Queensberry rules. I think we have to be tough about it. And I think we have to go after Trump and his entire organization and his campaign for spewing this stuff, because this is exactly what they did to Hillary Clinton the last time and how they won. This is what they did to John Kerry with the Swift boat nonsense. And we just can't let it happen again. And I will tell you, they can succeed, because unfortunately, most Americans just read headlines. But we need to be able to counter this, and I think there are ways to do that.
Yep. So let's talk about some of those ways that that we could do it. We have a lot of folks watching us here today, and this is a marathon, right? It's not a sprint, right? So we got to make sure that we run the entire marathon till November 3rd and beyond. So what are some of the ways that folks could counteract this and get involved?
Well, David, you and I have known each other a long time. We've been friends a long time, and I know you've got a great network of people. And I'm sure there are a lot of folks watching today. Everybody can be making calls to the key targeted states, the swing states. The Democratic Party can help coordinate that with you, and we're happy to do that, giving you folks that are persuadable, perhaps, or need to be encouraged to get out and vote. And we could be calling into Pennsylvania, we could be calling into Florida, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, even Arizona. We can do whatever we want just to get our people here in New York, folks in your network and your community, engaged in talking to other potential voters and making sure they get out to the polls. And by the way, when we talk to voters, we're telling them, make sure you stay the line. It's not just about the presidency, as important as that is. There are key Senate races in some of these states that we need to win, United States Senate races, but down ballot. It's so important now, coming off of the census, that if there's going to be redistricting, which there is, that Democrats are more in control of it than Republicans, who tend to gerrymander, Democrats and Democratic districts into existence. So there's a lot at stake here, and it's the presidency most certainly, but then it goes straight down ballot, and we can be doing a lot hitting those phones now, even in COVID-19 time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, one of the things we'll follow up, and then Louis, I don't know if you want to follow up on anything there, is that one of the goal of this, which is the C3 end of things, the LGBT network, is to get people out to vote, not necessarily tell people who to vote for. So over these, hopefully people hear about the issues, hear those platforms, see the stark difference between last week and this week, if we're just even looking at 2 weeks, right? I mean, we could be looking at the last 4 years, like you said, or even further back. To see where some of the parties are. But we do have a C4 arm that could really work with that Quality Long Island that's part of LGBT network, and to get, and we do make endorsements, and we certainly will be doing that soon. But you mentioned, Jay, the importance of down ballot, and bringing it home local to as News 12 says, as local gets, right? On Long Island. What about some of our congressional races that we have taken place in, at Nassau and Suffolk, on the East End in CD1 and et cetera? What could you offer to that?
Well, I think that both CD1 on the East End and the King seat CD2 are in play. I think we've got ourselves a real chance at those, and so for folks who live there, most certainly, getting the vote out and getting out to vote yourself and getting friends out is going to be so critical in those races. But again, phone calls can be made from anywhere. And we have lists, and we can share that with you or with anybody that would like to make those phone calls. We also have the state Senate. And when you think about it, our lives are impacted most greatly by our local or most local governments. And when it comes to New York State, let's remember, one of the first places where we had, under Governor Cuomo's leadership, a vote for marriage equality, and that didn't happen without us having enough votes in the New York State Senate. Well, now since then, and now we have a majority. We need to keep that majority, and so there are state Senate seats up for grabs all across the island as well, and upstate and other areas too. So the local race is extremely important, and unfortunately, too many people, go into the voting booth and they're interested in the presidential. So they vote for president and then they leave it and they walk out. And those are wasted votes. We need them.
Yep. Very important. Louis, do you want to add to that? Because I know we talked about, the importance of local races, right? It's not only the president and how, within our local congressional districts, we have, perhaps a mini Trump that is, in office right now in CD1. What do you want to add to that?
Well, I think when we add to that, and we saw that 2 years ago, the Democratic challenger lost by 4 percentage points. And going over even going back to 16, the shocking statistic for me is that apparently only 1 out of 2 self-described LGBT voters, people who registered voters, voted. And I think what we have to do with our local races and others is give the LGBTQ registered voters an incentive and reason to come out and vote. Now, seems to me pretty obvious that there's a reason. But why do you think they didn't come out in 18 and 16 in such a low percentage? So what can we do now to motivate the community that we're part of here?
If you're asking me, my answer is people have to understand what's at stake. And, we've made a lot of progress. Not enough, but a lot. If you take a look at 10 or 20 years ago, it's a much different country. In terms
of the congressional race where we have Lee Zeldin, that he's a Trump puppet, and he's not against the religious exemptions, which would discriminate against LGBTQ and other people. What locally you think should motivate people to know what's on the ballots in Suffolk County, Nassau County, or it's not on the ballot, what is on the agenda in the various county legislatures?
Well, in county races, which that's really going to be in 2021 when we hit the county races. But, I think that for now, to motivate people to come out and vote in the 2020 election, it's so important that they understand that we're either going to go forward with and make more provide for more freedoms for people, more recognition, transgender rights, things of that nature. We're going to be having a government that's compassionate, empathetic, and caring about people, or you're going to go backwards and, we're going to have less of it and more difficulties and frankly, more offensive language out of people. So I think that, it's not just what the agenda is. It's not just what's up, on the horizon for specific legislation. I think there's a whole cultural aspect to this. This country moves and legislation moves in response to cultural changes. And cultural changes come about when people coalesce behind certain values, certain principles, if you will, and then the candidates that represent those values and principles. And that's why I think it's important that we motivate people and get them to understand that getting to the polls this time and giving a sharp rebuke, frankly, to all of those. And I have to say, and again, I'm the Democratic chair, so I understand it may sound self-serving, but I do believe it, that giving a rebuke to the Republicans who have not just kept silent, but enabled the kinds of conversation, the kinds of language, the kinds of actions and activities that this true Republican Party has, done for the past 3.5 years. Our voices need to be heard. Last night, interestingly, if you watch the Republican convention, I think it was Eric Trump who spoke of the forgotten man. And he took that, as Trump before him, his father before him, took that from Richard Nixon, who used it in 1968. He was the forgotten man and woman. And it was from them came the silent majority. They would have you believe that the silent majority is made up of intolerant people throughout the United States who don't care about privacy and how people want to live and allow them to live in the lifestyle they want and love whomever it is that they want. They would have you believe that they don't want immigrants coming into this country, in spite of that fantasy show that Trump put on at the White House yesterday with the naturalization piece, the citizenship ceremony that he did. And I just don't believe that. I believe the silent majority are made up of good, honest, decent people who care for their neighbors and want to lift people up. And if this election is resounding in its result, and everybody comes out to vote for that, and everybody understands that while, in New York, you may not need each individual vote so for Biden to win the Electoral College, that may be true, but we need the numbers, resounding numbers. Hillary Clinton won the popular vote last time by 2,868,000 votes. That still says something, even though she's not the president. And we need to triple or quadruple that number nationally in the victory we pull off against Donald Trump and all of the Republicans down ballot, frankly.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think you bring up that we have to realize what's at stake here, right? And to those of us, the three of us sitting on the screen, and to many people we know, it's quite obvious, right? What's at stake: our liberty, our democracy, and so much more, our freedoms. And what I'd like to do is show a video right now when we're talking about what's at stake, and then to come back and talk about it. So here comes the video.
You're broken down and tired of living
Joey, where's the sound?
life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find a fighter.
President Trump is calling for transgender people to be banned from the military.
Why did you feel the need to ban transgender people from serving in the US military?
Because they take massive amounts of drugs. They have to.
And so it just seems to me an unnecessary thing for a guy who wants to be supportive of LGBT rights and the community around the world, that you've taken this action.
Well, it is what it is. Look.
A critical day for millions of LGBT workers.
The U.S. Supreme Court today hearing arguments in a set of cases that could determine whether the workers are legally protected from workplace discrimination.
Donald, go on the record. You're for gay marriage.
Well, I'm not. And
health advocates condemning the Trump administration rolling back protections for transgender patients, especially during a global pandemic. And he was criticized for doing it during June, which is Pride Month.
I am committing to you today that my administration will preserve the central role of faith-based adoption and foster care agencies to care for vulnerable children while following their deeply held beliefs.
The Trump administration proposing a controversial new rule that would allow faith-based adoption and foster organizations to deny their services to LGBTQ couples.
But what do you say to a lesbian or a gay man who are married and say?
I really don't say anything. I mean, I'm just Jake. I'm for traditional marriage.
So when we look at what's at stake, I mean, you take a look at that video, and there's so much there from where it started off. I don't know if we got to really see that stay on the screen or not, stay on the screen long enough. But it showed how many unregistered LGBTQ voters there were in those states that you talked about earlier, Jay. Wisconsin, Florida, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Arizona. So maybe just some thoughts on what you just saw when we take a look at what's at stake from several different perspectives.
Yeah, sometimes, I think it's unfathomable that, you have a president in the White House that really, tries to play to his base. And frankly, it's not a pretty looking base as far as I'm concerned. These are folks that, some of them, that just have such a, I think, hypocritical view of things. I love the evangelicals, who tout the wonder and the greatness of Donald Trump, and so much of what he does in his life goes against the teachings of the Bible, no matter what religion you're a part of. But I just find that it's so unfortunate that he has to find victims. He has to find people that he needs to take things away from to satisfy other members of his base and gain his support. But what bothers me most is not that we have Donald Trump doing that, because, okay, I'll take it that there's, a guy that happened to make it to president, whatever the circumstances and reasoning was, and in my judgment, he's a bad guy, and I think he's a bad guy, frankly. But he's the president. Okay, fair enough. Where are the decent Republicans? I always like to kid, and I'm a Democratic chair, and I like to kid, the Republican Party is my second favorite party. And, I like to think that, I guess, if I wasn't a Democrat, I'd probably be a Republican, frankly, though I differ tremendously with much of, their philosophy before Trump. But the one thing we always had in common, I always believed in, was that Democrats and Republicans alike were Americans first. And I can't understand how Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham and some of these other sycophants in the Senate don't stand up to this guy and his shenanigans and say it's just wrong and stop it, because they could have stopped it. And that's what I think is the most offensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most certainly. Lewis, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think one of the things that troubles me most from the videos is basically him standing up for religious principles, and that really translates into the religious exemption, which basically, under the proposal of the Evangelical Christians, the Republican Party, would say that if you have a religious belief, strong religious beliefs, or weak religious beliefs, you can actually deny other people their fundamental federal constitutional rights. He said that doctors and nurses now and medical professionals don't have to treat a trans person if they're somehow their religion is against that. And that's a horrible thing, to think that there are people in this country who would deny basic medical treatment. I'm not talking about trans operations and that sort of thing, which I believe should be allowed. But I'm talking about basic medical attention, or what he said about trans and gay people in the military. It is, I don't know how any LGBTQ person can not understand this goes against their fundamental rights. And of course, most of the people listening today are probably already agree with me on this. But I think it's this kind of thing that we have to tell our allies and our community that is really at stake here. It's not just a matter of whether you get more stuff from China or less stuff from China. It's our fundamental rights are at stake, and there's a large group of people who actually actively want to deny us those rights.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what can we do in the state, Jed, in the Senate and other things that can help protect those rights here in New York State, even if we have constitutional issues or interpretations?
I think you can count on New York State. Whatever rights Trump and the Republicans would choose to take away from the LGBT community and those folks, I think you can count on Governor Cuomo, and I think you can count on Andrea Stewart Cousins as Majority Leader of the Senate and Carl Hastie as Speaker of the Assembly to protect those rights through whatever legislation that the state can do. Obviously, we have no control over the military, the United States military. But I would say to you that I don't think it's New York that we have to worry about. I think that we have to worry about, our neighbors and friends and family members in some of these other states that don't have the benefit of democratic and progressive administrations at the head of their state governments. That's where I think that there's real concern, because there's no guarantees that what happens in Washington isn't going to have a real impact on them in some of these other states, because they have governors or legislatures that won't come together to protect the LGBT community.
Yeah, and that's something we really need to pay attention to. We have some questions from some of our viewers, so why don't we bring the first one in? I believe it's from Ken, right? That should be coming on our screen in a second. And again, if you have some questions or comments that please post them in whatever format you're watching in now, on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn. I believe we're even on Twitch. I didn't even know Twitch was a thing till we went virtual. But but post them, and I think we do have that question coming in shortly. Should be coming across our screen, I believe. It's from Ken, and there it is. So Ken asks, how do we maximize turnout and deflect the attacks that will inevitably come against Democrats?
Yeah, I think that the two separate questions. Maximizing turnout is getting on the phone and getting out your friends and neighbors and other people and calling into other states, and just phone banking. I think particularly in this time of COVID-19. Now, I heard some of the lies they said about Joe Biden last night, and I was offended. I've seen this before. I've seen this playbook. This is what they do. And frankly, I've recommended to the Biden campaign that Joe Biden sue the Trump campaign and Donald Trump personally for libel. I think it's the only way that he gives a serious response. Donald Trump has used the legal system to his advantage to intimidate his vendors, his customers, and others in his business empire for decades. it's time to turn the legal system on him. There's a case, Sullivan versus New York. I think it's a 1964 Supreme Court case, which really limited the ability of public people, like candidates for office, to sue someone for libel. You have to demonstrate a malicious intent, and you have to demonstrate that you knew for a fact that what you were saying was false. I think in both those cases, this qualifies. When we have intelligence service, American intelligence service reports that debunk completely the Russian propaganda that they're now spewing to destroy Joe Biden's good reputation, I think he ought to stand up there and say, look, I don't want the money. I'll give it to, say, cancer research. I don't need the money. But whether I win or I lose, and this won't be disposed of before the election day, but whether I win or I lose and become president, it doesn't make a difference. They're destroying my reputation, and there'll be people out there who believe it. And only the court system is going to take care of defending my reputation. So that's what I'm going to use. And I suggest that's what he does. And so I think we should fight and fight hard. I don't think you should just stand up and have a press conference, because there'll be people who don't believe you. And there'll still be people who don't believe him if he sues, and some may criticize it. But frankly, I think it at least puts Trump on notice that it's serious business. And by the way, I'd sue that guy for $5 billion, which is probably 15 times more than he really is worth. And that'll shake him up a little bit, let him have something to defend, and let him have to spend money on lawyers for a change. Because I think it's outrageous. And this is what they continue to do. And there are people out there that just believe it. And we lose elections accordingly. Look at what they did to Hillary Clinton. I don't think you're going to find a more decent and honest person out there. And I'll bet you there are a lot of viewers who say, really? Hillary Clinton? Well, that's because you've been reading some of the nonsense on some of these social media outlets, much of it put out either by Trump, the Republicans, or quite frankly, the Russians. And so, I don't need to be a conspiracy theorist, but let me tell you something. You just read the intelligence reports, read the report from the Republican-led Senate Intelligence Committee, and you see what went on in this election. We can't allow it to happen again, and we have to hit back hard.
Mm-hmm. Yep, fight him back. Different strategy than 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Basically don't take anything. Don't take it for granted as well, but also fight back, and fight back right away. Don't let that stuff linger.
Right.
Which is a problem. Louis, what do you think?
I couldn't agree more.
So I think we do have another question that we could bring in from Fred. And then I know, Jay, you have, it's a busy night. So after this question, maybe we'll get to some final thoughts that you'd like to leave everyone with. And Fred has a question. Okay, Fred, I know Fred. And so Fred's question is as most people today block unknown callers. So I guess this is referring to, let's get on the phone, let's call people in Florida, let's call people in Wisconsin, etc. Or when we're at home, call people in CD1, call people in CD2. So as most people today block unknown callers or don't answer calls, what are the method can we reach people other than perhaps phone banking? Phone banking is important, but what else can people do?
We have the capacity of texting. We can do that too. And we have the technology to do that. And again, I think that, in our local communities, old-fashioned neighbor-to-neighbor communication is so important too. And of course, if you have the resources and you can donating to the campaign is always very important and helps with the persuasion on digital platforms, the digital ads, TV ads, mailings, all of the traditional things that campaigns are still doing. So all of that can be done.
Okay, so there's many ways to get involved, and Louis, you've been involved for years. So is there more that you want to add to that, or stress the urgency for people to?
I think one of the things that there's a lot of confusion here in New York State, Suffolk County, where I am, about how we vote. Not necessarily who. I think everyone here probably in pretty much agreement. But we don't know if we mail in. We don't know if the post office will deliver it. We don't know if we go in person. And I think one of the things that we can do today and going forward is explain to people just what the process is in New York State. And I think you can go in early voting. You have to say you're going to be out of town or claim a medical issue to get an absentee ballot or what, because there's so much confusion. And also where to register. obviously you can only vote once, but where do you vote? Where you have two homes, maybe you can pick a district. So I think we have to explain to people or help them figure this out, because I know I'm still a little bit confused. And I think that's one of the things that we need to get out. If we're going to get our vote out here, we need to let people know how to do it.
Okay. Well, I think when it comes to registering, you register from whatever is your primary residence. Now, there are people who decide that their vacation home, let's say in the Hamptons, becomes their primary residence because they don't feel that voting in Manhattan, that's where they lived originally, or mainly, is as important, given that that's more democratic and they tend to want to get involved in the congressional race out in the East End. You can do that, but you have to declare something as your primary residence in the state. And to register, I think that we've got the registration forms, at the elections.com, or .gov, whatever the site is, and you can download them and get them to your Board of Elections and register. And I think you still can. You do have time yet to register, so I do that right away. When it comes to voting, you have several choices. You can apply for an absentee ballot. Concern over COVID-19 is an acceptable reason. It's very broad now. There is no check on it. Nobody is going to be checking whether you really are concerned about COVID-19. You can say you'll be out of town, and if you don't end up being out of town, you don't get arrested for that either. It was your intent to be out of town on election day, you're entitled to vote absentee. But you have to apply, and I do so right now. Get an application. I believe you can get them also online. Get them to your Board of Elections, and then they'll send you a ballot. You fill out that ballot immediately. That's what I would recommend. If you put a postage stamp on it, it has to go first class, even though election ballots are supposed to, even though they're mailed under a bulk mail return, they're supposed to go first class. But who knows with this postal service? But if you give a first class stamp on it, it's going to go quicker. And if you send it out way in advance of the election, it's going to get there. The problem is when people wait till the very end, that there's some concerns that the ballot may not get there in time. So I think that we're going to be okay here in New York State if people do that. There are going to be multiple sites. I'm not sure the number. In Suffolk, I think it was 9 or 10. In Suffolk County, we had 15 in Nassau County. Early voting sites, 10 days early. Also on the County Board of Elections website, they'll give you the locations of those early voting sites, and you'll probably receive something in the mail about it as well, typically. And then, of course, you can vote on Election Day if you don't do any of those other things. So that's how I can suggest you make sure your vote gets in. And if you'd like me to conclude in any fashion, unless there's another question, the only thing I would say, David, and I said it to the delegates, you're going to be talking to a lot of people. And even though it seems so obvious to us, there are people who have not been engaged in the political process, who don't understand politics. They don't see the difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. They don't see the importance of voting. And I think you need to engage them, not enrage them. I always say that. But when it comes to having to explain to people, which party to vote for and why it's so important, I always say this. I tell people everything you need to know about politics, you discovered when you first learned how to drive a car. If you want to go forwards, you put it into D. You want to go backwards, you put it into R. I don't know a year any greater than this that demonstrates that as clearly. So I urge everybody to get out and vote Democratic, and let's go forward and take this country out from under the dark clouds that have consumed us for the past 3.5 years and into the bright new light of a nation that cares about one another, cares about the people and the citizens that work hard every day and just want a good life for themselves and their families and want to love who they want to love and want to be respected for who they are and not subject to anybody's particular judgment. So that's what I think is up at stake in this election, and I just hope everybody gets out and gets to vote.
Excellent. Louis, any words you want to say to Jay before he signs off?
Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure.
Excellent. Jay, thank you for being our inaugural guest here.
My pleasure.
And hopefully you'll come back as we move through this marathon, right? And that we will meet again somewhere along the route between now and November 3rd. and then hopefully if votes are counted on the night of November 3rd, if all the votes are counted on November 3rd, we'll be setting up a celebration party with masks, of course. But so thank you, Jay, once again for joining us. And again, we're going to put up information shortly about some of those early voting sites that will be posted. We already have that put together. In fact, we put it up on the screen now so that Jay could see what we put together, and we can get this to you to get this out. This is for Nassau and Suffolk County. And we'll also, just to remind folks, all the suggestions that Jay gave in terms of how our vote can be counted and making sure that you're registered and knowing your polling place and going early, or as Michelle Obama said, pack up that lunch bag, you know, if you have to wait online on November 3rd, and just do so. All of that is easily accessible by texting Vote Proud to 484848 to the LGBT network. So text Vote Proud to 484848, and you will get all the links to make sure that your vote is counted. In fact, you could see it up on the screen right now. So Jay, as you see, we have all the early voting sites in Nassau and Suffolk County posted. We have that texting information. You know, and as we saw in the beginning of the video, there are consequences to not voting, right? And we're talking about them. So Jay, thank you once again. Thank you once again for joining us. And so now Louis and I are going to just finish up a little bit and chat a little bit about today and moving forward in the future. So and there we are. We have a two-shot again. So Louis, you know, I can't thank you enough for reaching out to say that, you know, we need to do something more than what is being done because of that sense of urgency. So I don't know if there's something else that you want to share right now, or tell our viewers about what's coming forward in the future, or what we hope is going to come forward in the future.
Yeah, just to start with, I've gotten several texts saying that I need to move closer to the screen. I need to look up. I want to thank everybody for their comments, because this is a new thing for me, and so anything to make it better and perhaps more watchable. But I think, and when David and I were talking, we actually want to have various programs. We want to have both, for example, the Democratic and Republican congressional candidate line is not together, at least separately. We'll see how that works. Because I think we have a lot of questions that we like to ask, and I hope you all will want to hear the answers. I mean, maybe many people have their minds made up, but I think it's always better, as Mr. Jacob said, it's better to engage rather than enrage. So with facts and other things, it's often better to have the discussions. I'm afraid I probably enraged more people than I've engaged, but people will change. So anyway.
So I, you know, and I think, you know, I wouldn't say, Louis, because I know you for many years, that you've enraged people. You've done what Jay says you need to do, right? Which is respond and don't let the bullying take place. You know, and so, and that's, you know, that's something I think that we all need to model. And when we do fight back, we fight back with facts, right? We fight back with science. We fight back with education, and we engage people. And that's what Louis and I hope to do from now until November 3rd, by bringing candidates from all different parties on. You know, everyone's going to be invited. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to show up. But we're going to invite everyone. We're going to make sure that everyone has a seat at our virtual table so that they can answer the questions that we're going to ask about LGBTQ equality and justice, right? Because there is a lot at stake. And we have to make sure that we get out to vote, that we register to vote, we get out to vote, we get our friends out to vote, that we watch the polls to make sure that every vote is counted. And so if you have any suggestions of different topics that you would like to see, you know, please send them along through any of the LGBT network social media, or directly to Louis or myself. And we'll be working on bringing on guests. So Louis, any final words before we sign off?
No, just thank you to all the people who are still on and listened. And again, please give us your comments, not just about video style. And what we can do, what you would like to hear and see, we'll see if we can get that.
Excellent. Thank you. And as Lawrence O'Donnell says, Louis Bradbury has the final word. So thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you on September 9th, which will be our next show, our next program. Thank you once again. Thank you, Louis. I'm so glad and so honored to be doing this work with you. Thank you, and everyone, text Vote Proud to 484848 and make sure you have all the voting information you need. Take care, everyone. Stay safe, and we look forward to seeing everyone on September 9th. Take care.